Welcome back to our continuing discussion on poverty, a topic under the syllabus of current challenges facing the Indian economy. We have learned about the meaning, we have learned about classification of poverty. Today we'll learn about that poverty line and also we'll come to know about the extent of the number of poor that are here in India. But first, before we go into that, let me remind you that last class we have learned about the division, the classification of poverty. Not it, and we have seen that those who are poor are mostly chronic poor, always poor, and usually poor. Always poor are those that are at the lowest rung of income earning, where they live in a very poor condition. You can say that if you look at the figure, if this is the line that define that poverty, that they are far away below. They are BPL, below the poverty line. They don't touch that line. But this second group of usually poor, they are usually poor, but sometimes due to the good earning, maybe they are able to get job at certain period of time. They can get income at that point of time. They may cross, but once in a while, but mostly they are poor. So these are the problem that people are facing. The other groups are somewhat okay because some are like churning poor. They are mostly poor, but also they experience uh, the opportunity to avail the basic necessities of life because they can get more income. Occasionally poor is the opposite of usually poor. Here these people are always above the line, but sometimes due to the bad condition they may face that experience of being poor, but most of the time they are okay. These never poor, they are always the line. So you have learned about that. Today what we want to do is we want to know what is this line that differentiate between poor and non-poor, and to be able to explain that and what the government has been using. There are many ways to measure it, but what we will look at, this one method, is to look at the monetary value of the minimum calorie intake. Calorie intake is the food that we take in. When we take the food, we get the nutrients from food like carbohydrates, vitamins, protein, and all those we calculate. And if you can get to the total of 2400 calories per head per day in a rural area, then you are no longer poor. You are no longer poverty. And in urban areas, the minimum is 2,100 calories. You need more calories in rural areas, you understand, because of the requirement of physical strength. You need more calories, more food, because you mostly use uh, you understand, mostly labor work. So that's why this is the definition of that line. If you cross to 400, you are APL. If you below, you are BPL. In urban areas, 2100. So this is based on the calories of the food that we take daily. But if we convert that into money, in terms of money, in 2011 and 12, this line was defined in rural areas as consumption worth 816 rupees per person a month. If you earn 816 in a month, in rural areas, that's okay. You can get the requirements of life. In urban areas, the minimum is 1,000. So these keeps changing. These rates keep on changing more as time passes on because of the increase in the price. But 11, 12, this is the amount. Okay, if you cross 816 in rural or 1,000 in urban, then you are no more poverty. You understand? This is the line that differentiate between poor and non-poor. How the government arrive at this line is by using the monthly per capita expenditure. How much per head they expend the expenditure, the spending of these people on food. And based on that spending, the government takes it as a proxy, as a substitute, as if that spending is the income of those people, and That's what they do to identify the poor. Okay, that is the way it works. That is the way this line is defined. Even though this line has been criticized, has so many weaknesses, limitations that has been put forward by scholars, economists, and um, all those social scientists, but it still is uh, the definition of poverty line. Okay, so they base on what people spend every month per head. Per head convert into per family. Okay, so that's about this line. So, like I've said, there are many criticism here. You can read about that it lacks so many things, but because it does not include these things. There are many factors rather than talking only about income and consumption. You need to also look at, for instance, whether people get access to basic education, literacy, healthcare, drinking water, sanitation. All these need all these factors need to be considered to develop a poverty line. That's the suggestion because these things are neglected in that line. Okay, so what we can conclude from here is that we want to bring out help. The government wants to bring out help through schemes, through policies, programs, bring about development. And that's why, if you want to define development, it should not be development only in physical sense, but it's about development is about removing the obstacles to the things that a person can do in life. Development should be associated with helping the people, not it, to get them out from the difficult position, difficult situation of being poor, poverty. So if you talk about development, it's not about only infrastructure, and it should have an effect, not it, on people. So it's about things can do people can do in life, such as solving this illiteracy, solving ill health, lack of access to resources that they need to um, get to work, not it, in their daily activities. And development is about solving this lack of civil and political freedom. All these together, we can say, is the effective outcome of development. So if we want to bring development, the focus is not only on that um, growth per se, but it's about the effect on the livelihood of the people. But the government keeps on claiming that this is the method they use, this is what they need to identify the poor, and it's being said that the development through economic reforms that we have talked in chapter 3 have resulted in a decline in poverty levels. The government has brought many developmental programs, and out of that there has been decline in poverty, but criticisms there critics are there, economists raise doubt about this claim. So that's about seeing the weakness of this line, weakness of the government policy. But what we need to know is that we have a poverty line, the government defined through that minimum calorie intake, which takes about the monthly pay expenditure of the people, even though it has weaknesses, but it's there to stay. You need to um, know that. But so I mean to say, because of the feeling of the people that this lacks something, it's weak, there's limitation. So there is individual scholar who has had attempted to find alternative methods. For instance, Amartya Sen, a noted Indian Nobel laureate, has developed an index known as Sen Index. He made his own method to find the number of poverty. So this also helped in finding the poverty of a country. Another tool such as poverty gap index, square poverty gap, just to know the name, that there are other methods apart from what has been given by the government. So that's poverty line. Now we need to know about the extent of the poor people in India. And how do we count that? When the number of poor people is estimated, is counted as a proportion of people below the poverty line, it is known as the head count ratio. Head count ratio is a proportion of the poor over the below BPL. Number of poor, proportion of people below poverty line. Now, how many of them are below the line? It's head count. Okay, so based on that, we can find out how many are below that line that has been defined by that method. So the official data on poverty is made available by the planning commission to the public, estimated on the basis of consumption, like we've said, and this has been done by this organization, NSSO. And how much is that? If you look at the chart below, 1973 to 2012, it was 320 million in here the number of million. If you look at the chart here in 2000, in 1973-70, it's about 320 somewhere here. If you calculate together, this is for the rural, this is for the urban, so 320. And the good news is that this number has come down to 270 million. But 270 million is, imagine, it's much more than the population of many countries, individual country. So that's the big challenge for India. We still have many people below this line, 270 in 2011 2012. Okay, that's the point to note, 270 millions. And in terms of percentage, that comes to 55% in 1973-74 and 22% in 2012 11-12. Okay, so that's about the percent. How many of the poor people are there in India? Out of the total number of people we have, out of the total population, 22% are still below poverty. So that's a huge challenge, huge problem for India. 1/5 the people are very poor. In 73-74, more than 80% of the poor resides in rural areas. But in 2012, nothing has changed. More people are poor in rural areas than in urban areas. This means that more than 3/4 of the poor in India still resides in village. So majority people in villages are poor. That's the point to note. Okay, so you talk about this percentage 55 to 22. It has come down from 55 to 22. Point to note again, I repeat, and from in absolute terms, absolute number 320 millions to 270 millions is the number of poverty that we have in India. Okay, if you look at states, if you look at state level, you'll find 6 states in 2000, 1973-74 that are below the lowest three states, the poorest three states, the states that have the poorest of the poor: Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal, and Orissa. 6 states. But in 2012, many states have been able to grow, develop, and improve, able to reduce the number of poor people. Yet, out of that those 6 states before, 4 still at the lowest rank of poorest state in India. Orissa still cannot get out of that line. Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh. These 4 states are the lowest. I mean, the poorest. The states which have the poorest of the poor in India. And how do we know? We compare with the national average. How many? 22 in the nation. But these 4 states are still below the 22. I mean, more than 22% of poor people. But you understand, out of those 6 states, only 2 have been able to improve. That is West Bengal and Tamil Nadu. So that's about what we want to learn today about the poverty line, and also the absolute and the percentage of poor people in India. So what you learn about what is the poverty line based on calorie intake, that's number one. And number two is what is the extent of poverty in India.